Clement Mango, not once, but twice, delivering a fraudulent tabulation of the District 4 count in violation of a court order, and resulting ultimately in the fraudulent delivery of an election result. It was witnessed by the entire world and condemned by the entire world. Through the observer missions we had here from all of the democratic nations. Since then, at the instance of the Prime Minister of Barbados, Mia Mottley, our de facto President, David Granger, and the General Secretary of the People's Progressive Party, C, Mr. Barrett Jagdeo, have agreed that a recount of the entire elections should take place. And we are approximately 5 days away from that recount being completed. Now that recount already has dramatically exposed Mingo's fraudulent figures for the entire world to see. But it's done another thing. At this stage, it has already demonstrated, if not established, if not evidenced, that the People's Progressive Party has won the election and APNU and AFC have lost the election. Unfortunately, that is not being accepted and recognized by APNU AFC. And what is now happening is an attempt by that party, still holding on to the trappings of power of a government, to discredit the entire election process. And not recognize the truth that has been displayed for all to see from the progressive recount. Now, well-known businessman, Mr. Stanley Ming, who is a former PNC parliamentarian, appeared on an APNU AFC video Facebook program a few days ago with the former Minister Cathy Hughes, and alarmingly set out statistics with the deliberate intent of discrediting the entire electoral list, claiming that it's padded, it's inflated, it is fraudulent, with the clear intent of discrediting the entire elections. I remind Mr. Ming of a very famous quote from a former British Empire Prime Minister. In fact, I think his name was Benjamin Disraeli. There are lies, there are damn lies, and then there are statistics. This is a very serious and dangerous allegation on the part of Mr. Ming, especially if it is believed. And I've therefore invited a highly respected chartered accountant and lawyer, Mr. Christopher Ram, to address these allegations made by Mr. Ming.
Yes, Kit. Thank you very much. Stanley Ming and I go back a very long time. You, Chris Correa, Mike Correa, King.
Indeed, I have a long friendship with Stanley. And in fact, Stanley was the best man at my wedding.
Wow, wow. I hope you're not offended by some of the things I'm going to say, because I believe it's not only the message in this case, but the messenger. Stanley Ming is a respectable and respected private sector individual.
Absolutely.
Now, I want to also give credit to Mr. Ming in the APNU AFC political program. He did say that the 2015 elections was up in the air, claiming that the numbers were gerrymandered. But guess what?
But he did not speak out at that time.
He did not. Not only did he not speak out, it was the same Stanley Ming who immediately after those elections was calling his contacts in the private sector to contribute to Granger's victory. Now, that to me isn't quite, those things are not consistent. He ought to have known. Now, I have had several discussions with Stanley. I meet him at various social functions and so on. Never once has Stanley raised to me, and we talk like motor racing, business, now we talk politics, I guess. Never once, in all those several encounters, has Mr. Ming raised any questions in my presence concerning the 2015 elections. Now he's challenging the 2020 elections. And I have to ask myself, why? Mr. Ming is now getting involved. He's been a politician, as you said, member of parliament. He's a mix of statistics, arithmetic, and politics. But in my view, if you take those three things together, what better opportunity ever presented itself where there was a confluence of those three things, other than the whole business of the majority of 65. Stanley Ming is talking about all these statistics, several. I looked at them. He remained silent for more than 1 year while Granger ignored the no confidence motion, ignored our constitution. And I'm sad to say this. Stanley probably continued to do business with the PNC because Stanley is well respected in the party. He was one of Hoyt's leading advisors. You remember, I think he was a key, with Jerome Khan was one of the key persons in the PNC reform. Now, I don't know how heavily Stanley has invested in the PNC, surely his career, but he certainly has an outsized influence with that party, particularly at the leadership level.
Indeed,
now, as I said,
indeed, it probably goes beyond that party.
Possibly. But I'm saying what I know, what is in the public domain. He was a key advisor to Hoyt when Hoyt was persuaded in 1997 that he had won the 1997 elections, which ended with a CARICOM audit which found nothing. You remember Justice Cross?
I remember indeed.
Yes. Now, yet that did not stop Hoyt from embarking on that destructive campaign, slow fire, more fire, in circumstances.
Wouldn't you say that encouraged Hoyt to do that?
I think the fact that persons of the
Because he
caliber of
was
Stanley Ming.
convinced by Stanley
Yes,
from the stats that Stanley presented to Hoyt at the time that he had won
yes,
and that he had been cheated.
and which is probably what's happening again. So the circumstances are not too dissimilar. Here it is. Ming is being active and is recruited, and that's why I'm disappointed in Stanley. He's being recruited by the PNCR to lend his image as an independent businessman to this notion, this plot that by the APNU plus AFC to overturn the results of the March 2nd, 20 elections. Now, it is left to be seen whether the consequences of the evil but unfoldingly clumsy attempt on this occasion will be any less dire. I also want to talk, since I'm talking with Stanley, my friend, wasn't Stanley offended by what you have just referred to, Mr. Mingo? Should Stanley not have come out, and when he came out on the platform, should he not have said, look, you know, things have, as David Hines sometimes tried to do, things, both sides are bad. He has not called out Mingo for what is the most blatant, bizarre, and barefaced electoral fraud one can imagine. The votes were already counted. It's just putting it on a spreadsheet, putting it on an Excel. This was done. Does it not worry someone like Stanley that I cannot be associated with this? Let me put it this way. If Mr. Ming was to discover a fraud in his enterprise, would he keep that person there? Is he not shocked by the revelation by the PRO of GCOM that Mr. Mingo is still employed and is being paid by the taxes, partly from the taxes paid by Stanley Ming?
And apparently working in one of the
regions. So I think what Stanley ought to do.
Indeed, is it not shocking that an investigation into Mingo's performance, if you like, has not been already launched
Well,
by GCOM itself?
I think Stanley should have said and should have called on the party and called publicly, given he has this public space.
And is a very important member of that party.
Yes, and to encourage the party or GCOM, with their influence at GCOM, to arrest and investigate Mingo if an ordinary person did that. Now, what it says about our country, if you could commit a political crime, no matter how consequential, once you've got the party behind you, you are protected. Because that's the only thing I can see protecting Mingo. But the fact is, I believe Stanley Ming ought to have said something about it, because it is that nefarious act by Mingo, whether he was the architect, author, and the brains behind it, is a different issue. His hands are on the document along with Walter Lawrence, and I think a second one with Joseph. This is such a wasteful recount that is taking place, such a waste of taxpayers' money. We could have probably built another 2 hospitals, not with the wasteful kind of expenditure, but we could have done those things. We could have, our public servants, our security, all could have been beefed up.
But let's move, Chris, if I may, to the actual claims and allegations that Stanley is putting out there now.
Well, I wanted to get to the reason why I think Stanley is doing this. Maybe it's unwitting. Maybe he has become a tool. Now, of the APNU, AFC. What Stanley Ming is doing is trying, as we said, to overturn these elections. But Kit, I am not only interested in the overturning of the results of the elections. I'm interested in the consequences. I've spent long enough in this country. I witnessed firsthand the violence in 1992, violence in 1997, 2001. We've seen these things. Stanley Ming, unwittingly or otherwise, is becoming part of this. Now, Stanley said that Guyanese need to know the truth. But there is something called the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. When you look at Stanley Ming's selective choice of statistics, he is certainly guilty of not meeting these tests. On the radio program, for example, with a minister, he stated boldly that the 2012 census was not published. Now, how could Stanley make such a mistake? The 2012 census was, of course, published. That's an elementary error. Was it?
He has based his entire argument on that.
That's correct. Well, I wouldn't say entire, but a significant part of his argument.
Part of it.
Now, how could he do something like that? I am saying that that statement was at best careless, and at worst, self-serving and dangerous deception. Now, Stanley said, and he admitted to not being a statistician, and this was a simple analysis. Despite that, he seemed more than willing to confound his listeners with an array of numbers designed to create his own truth. You know, this thing about fake truth and false truth and all, and you entitled it the whose truth and so on. And he was playing to his audience with words like miracle, fascinating, Martian, impossible, sleight of hand. When did he discover these things? When did Stanley Ming this? So I'm talking about his figures. Now you ask me about some of those, all the figures. There have been a number of letters in the media that have shown his numbers don't mean anything. And I want to deal, because I just don't want to deal with the figures. I want to deal, what is the mischief Stanley Ming might be up to. Now, I would suggest that if you're going to deal, neither Stanley nor I, Stanley is or I, a statistician, but basic knowledge of statistics, common sense, tells you.
You are a chartered accountant,
Yes.
and you deal with figures all your
You
life.
deal with figures, and we do deal with statistics. It's elementary that if you're going to deal with anything over a long time span, you look at the intervening events to see how they would have adjusted, how they need to adjust and impact on the issues you're dealing with. So, this business about the registration, does Stanley Ming not know that in the first decade of this century, Guyana moved from episodic registration to house registration, which was done on a continuous basis? Did he not know that? I can't believe Stanley Ming doesn't know that.
Explain that, the continuous.
Well, continuous in the past, before you have house to house and episodic, but now on the continuous registration, they're season. It's not long periods every year, 2 years. You go in, you can register. So the obligation then.
So as people come of
Yes.
age,
Yes,
they are added continuously.
that's correct.
To the list.
And if you don't have your card, you get your card. You can go and check to see whether you are. You know, citizens.
And is it not also that every Guyanese who is registered and has an ID card and has immigrated
Yes.
remains on the list?
Absolutely. I'm
So
coming to that. Now, Stanley must know that there were 8 registration cycles up to 2016.
Correct.
Now, there are all these registration, these GCOM buildings around the country. What do you think? What do people think these things are for? Now, I also wish to make a serious comment on Stanley Ming's ignorance, oversight, dishonest attempt to conflate the official list of electors with population. That's what he's doing. He's saying, look, how could you have so many electors when your population is only 750,000? Now,
But it is not the population.
absolutely, it's your worldwide population that has found itself onto the registration.
Which includes every Guyanese who is registered and lives overseas.
That's correct. The one area that the list gets overstated is overseas people debts don't come back to the the revenue, the registrar's office. That's the only
As I
area.
understand it, Chris, am I right, that the deaths of Guyanese at home,
Notify to GCOM
and GCOM takes them off.
that's the law.
But if you die overseas, they remain on the list.
Yes, yes. But the danger with Stanley, what Stanley Ming, he was conflating the two, and that's dishonest. That's unforgivable. Now, and I don't think it took the Chief Justice to tell us that you can't remove people's names from the list. The Constitution gives you a right, wherever you live. So I think Stanley has been very dishonest in that regard, and he ought to correct himself.
So let me just take you back. Our population, in terms of a statistical examination of the list, is not 750,000.
Not-
It's millions.
Yes. Well, not millions, but it's over a million.
It's in the millions.
Yes.
Into the
yeah,
millions.
yeah, yeah.
Because it includes every Guyanese that is registered, has an ID card, and remains overseas.
It's as simple as that.
They can come home if they wish on election day to vote,
No, that's correct. That's correct.
but they remain on the list.
But
then,
as I said, the danger is to conflate the two.
and then when you become 14 years of age,
You go on the National
you
Registrar of Registrants, yes.
automatically
That's
go
correct.
in and you register and you're on the list. The adding to the list of persons who come of age.
Well, I can't say he hasn't, because his statistics are based on a time
But I'm talking
slide.
about on a continuous basis.
Yes. I don't know what Stanley has taken, but I think some of his omissions, he's guilty of that truth, whole truth and nothing but the truth. Now, Stanley has some concerns. As I said earlier, we have had significant changes in the system with the continuous registration. Yet, Stanley has pointed out that growth over the 4-year period 2011-2015 was 20%. This is on the official list of electors. And for the period 2015 to 2020, 16%. Now, that's not a substantially, if you take it over the period, it's not particularly high. But certainly in the second case kit, and we talk about this forgetting facts, we had a house-to-house registration, an illegal house-to-house registration. And instead of GCOM saying, look, squash everything, they duplicated. So a big part of the increase between 2015 and 2020 has to do with that illegal house-to-house registration. I wanted to bring one other point to you. When Mr. Ming talks about trying to discredit the elections, he's not talking about the voting, he talks about the list. But if you look at the voting, it's hardly gone up significantly, and it's entirely explicable. So the voting population, 11%, 3%, and so I think that he has selected information that is dangerous. Joining in the attempt to overthrow the elections is dangerous, dishonest, and irresponsible. Now, we've had this situation in 1997. If there is unrest and worse, sparked by the narrative of the APNU AFC that the PPPC rigged the elections, I hope that my friend Stanley Ming will be prepared to come out publicly and claim ownership of the consequences, if only indirectly.
On that note, Chris, I'd like to thank you very much indeed for joining me in this program, because I think it is absolutely essential that the voters out there, our population, understand that in fact we've had a free and fair election. We had a process recognized by the entire world, and we must now accept the figures from the recount. Thank you very much, Chris.
My pleasure.
And thank you.